I've spent my whole career in team sports, and I definitely believe no matter how talented you think you are, no matter how successful you think you've been, it always takes a team of people to make you better. And if you're successful at building relationships, then as you get old, like I am now, you can call on these relationships you develop, and you can marry a lot of the things that you're doing in business together to truly make a synergy. And that's where I spend the majority of my time. I'm involved in about 15 different businesses, and I try to interconnect them because I think there are a lot of overlaps. That's what I really, really enjoy the most.
Well, hello, everybody. What's going on? Welcome to summer. Welcome to construction season and mosquitoes and cookouts and campouts and also situation critical. You know, it's funny because the other day I went and about a year ago, I was out and about and everybody was telling me how real estate was the best thing to be in. Well, last week I went and got a chip removed from my windshield. You know, I drive a Jeep Wrangler, like a Jeep, and it's got the windshield straight up, so it's very prone to stones hitting it. I went and got the windshield repair, and the guy who was doing removing the crack was giving me advice on how it was situation critical, that the world was falling, the sky is falling, everything is going to you know where, in a handbasket. And so I thought to myself, man, we have this thing where we just kind of listen to what one or two people say, and we're not even sure of the content that they say, and then we repeat it and it picks up a life of its own. I know, Jennifer, you're going to be talking about this. I believe you call it the super secret parrot effect. But here we are, ladies and gentlemen. It is so great. While people are joining us, let's see who's in the house. Prabha is in the house. Nima's in the house. Nima, I love your hair. Look at you with the long dangly earrings going on. Don Rossum is looking very chill. Who else is there? Jennifer's there. Ken's there. Ping's there. Man, if I don't call out your name, it's only because my screen is only a certain size. Michelle is in the house. Duncan and Leanne is in the house. Hey, put in the chat where you're from. Just, it gives us an idea. And if you are new here, it will tell you the width and breadth of our community. Just throw it in the chat where you're from. I'm coming to you from Toronto, or actually technically for the GTA people, north part of Brampton. But everybody else, that's like Toronto, Canada. How's that? Anyway, we are excited to get started. The one of the things that we have found, welcome to the research lab. And one of the things that we have actually found is that during times like this, everybody wants to feel like they know what's going on. So people start talking about all kinds of things, and that the sky is falling. Today at Rule, we want to actually look at, is the sky actually falling? And if it is, what do we do? What table do we hide under? Or is it that the sky is not falling, but there's some stuff going on? Maybe it's just raining a little bit. We want to be able to bring you real time, real data, real intelligence that is able to show you what the future looks like and what the present is, so that you can move confidently in preparing for your future, especially in the world of real estate investing. So welcome to our lab. Now, we do need to have a disclaimer here. Oh, what is Rule? Well, Rule is a laboratory of specialists, and we focus on real estate, on research, data, and analysis. We combine it with artificial intelligence and real estate investment leaders. A number of leaders on our platform are people that are actually in the trenches with you. We are actively investing. We are either buying, selling, renting. We're in the game. Okay? So really, mainly to take the guesswork out of your real estate prowess and the way you work it. So a legal disclaimer, take a screenshot of this if you like. We do not provide investment advice and on our platform or on what we say, but we are here for education purposes. You know how it works, so you can read that at your own time. A couple rules for us. One, do ask questions, get involved, say hi, share feedback, thoughts. Don't solicit and don't sell. And looking through the room, I don't see anybody that I'm going to have to jump through the Zoom screen and, deal with. So I think we're all good. A couple housekeeping things. Main thing, you got to have fun. And two, this event is being recorded, so it's available for you in the Rule Member back office. Our agenda for today is that we are going to look at what is happening in the Canadian and US market. We're going to give you an overview so that you might be really well equipped to see what's going on. And then we're going to do a market analysis in Edmonton. Okay, so those of you, some of you have, number of you have said, what's going on in Edmonton? Is it a good time to buy? I thought everything, with gas prices being so high, don't even go to Edmonton. Well, you're going to learn the real truth here. Next events, you need to take a screenshot of this. July 13th, July 20th, July 27th are our next events. And if you don't want to take a screenshot, you can grab your phone, just scan the QR code, and it will take you right to a link for our events coming up. The research lab today is with Jennifer Hunt, and she needs no introduction. She has multiple types of properties. And I've known Jennifer. Now, Jennifer, I think I have known you for about 10 years. That's a long time to know someone in this. So, and I know that every time I work with Jennifer, what I appreciate about Jennifer is her ability to be able to see through, the noise, the confusion. And I have been able to execute and buy real estate with confidence because of the information that she has provided to me. So, Jennifer, welcome, and I'll let you take over from here.
Awesome.
I'll be in the background. If you need anything, I'm right here.
You betcha. Thank you so much, Naran. Give a round of applause for our Chief Leadership Officer. Way to go. Thank you so much, Naran. So welcome again. I am Jennifer. Oh, thanks, Kathy. That's awesome. Jennifer, the Chief Intelligence Officer with the Real Estate Wealth Lab. And I am also a real estate investor. And I think, thank you, Naran, pointing that out is important because what I say, I apply, it matters. I have a portfolio across Canada and in the US, and I've been investing for about 10 years. So in case you're tuning in and you're wondering, she just into research? No, it's both. So there we go. So where we're going to get started today is that a real estate cycle. And the real estate cycle is simply the business of a real estate cycle. And what we want to be looking for is those expansion phases, stabilization, contraction phases. And it kind of moves and contracts, almost like an accordion, if you will. And that's what we're here today to really go through and learn. And there's a lot of craziness out there. Are you hearing it? Is it feeling nerve-wracking out there? Dawn and Nima and Graham, have you heard some crazy stories and stuff like that? And people are saying, no, the market's going to crash. Well, we're going to really get into that today. It's very important for us to see behind behind the headlines, really, and actually into the data. So what we have at Rule is we've got the real estate cycle formula. Now, this is different because what we include is about 24 indicators that we look at, 23, 24, something like this. And what happens is that they move the market at different times and they have different weight and they interact with each other. And it's funny, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later, is that some indicators actually influence other indicators that influence another indicator, and so on. And then they interact in different ways. And when we have different indicators doing things at different times, we get some really interesting times, and that's exactly what we're in today. So we will be going through this, and what I want to point out especially today is that you'll notice that there's a leading indicators at the bottom. That's GDP, jobs, people. So it's economic activity. There's some others. Inflation is actually a leading indicator. It's also a lagging indicator. So it's fun. You get to like find out which one's going where. But lagging indicators are actually all the rental stats and the property stats. So that's why we spend a lot of time looking at these leading indicators, because they project in approximately 2 years what's going to happen. It's about 1 year for the rental market, and then it's about 2 years for the property market. However, if they're doing this, then it actually takes longer. And that's what we want to be looking at. And oh, Nito is asking if we're having a real estate class. Yes, we are. And Naren will talk about that at the break, so stay with us. We have just started a 10-week session that you can come and join in and learn about real estate and how to do it. And you can join. So we'll get you started on that for sure. So again, a little bit more about me is not only am I a real estate investor, I love research. I mean, this is truly one of my passions. So thank you for being here. Thank you for helping support Real Estate Wealth Lab and me, so I get to do this for you. I did my master's degree in sensationalism and news, go figure. And I really enjoy doing research, and what I was able to uncover is take those skills, apply them to news and to studies and research for real estate investors. And that's why we question what's in the news, and also even various biases from various different sources. So even if it's a study, the study may have an actual, what do you call it? A bias. And so we have to get, we definitely go from lots of different sources, and that's important for us. So that's us questioning what's in the news. So we're going to start today. By the way, we do Canada and the US macros economics and how they impact real estate. So we are getting into the US. Don't worry, it's pretty equal. But I needed to start with a little Canadian stuff. Is that okay? You'll see some American stats in here, but so political climate, there was just what day is it today? We're on the 22nd. So this report was just released yesterday, Fraser Institute, and it's about the accumulated debt between 33 industrialized countries, and during this period of government spending, if you will, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so what happened is when they did this study, it found some results that are a little bit dissatisfying. So in other words, right here is that here's what it says, is despite accumulating the second most debt of 33 countries, Canada performed worse in its economic recovery. Say what? So what does that mean? So we borrowed the second most debt. We're the one in orange here. Second most debt for gross debt to GDP ratio. And yet the yield, the return on investment for that, we had the 11th lowest GDP in 2020. Then we did even more poorly in 2021. So that's not a good trend, by going down to the 12th lowest GDP. And we had the third worst unemployment. So what do I have to say about that? I have to say that this is a very interesting situation, and Canada blew the budget with so little to show. Oh, Canada, not oh, Canada. So what this means is that Canada blew its budget on things that maybe weren't so helpful for the employment situation, for encouraging economic development, on all of these things that help our economic activity and our jobs recovery. So I liken it to a little bit like maybe we went out and bought candy as opposed to buying seeds. And like if we're thinking about our household groceries, like let's say, household groceries, you're like, man, I've got to actually put my groceries, it's tough times, I got to put my groceries on my credit card. Okay. And I'm not going to be able to pay that credit card for like a decade. So I've got to make sure that whatever I put on that credit card, it's actually going to be a lot longer than that with all the debt that the government has. So what am I going to spend it on? I'm going to probably spend it on a garden so that I can get a good yield and that I can produce for years to come, instead of going and buying candy. You see what I'm saying here? And I think that that's what we just did. So unfortunately, that's not great for our economic recovery over the long term, or our debt to GDP ratio. And so, okay, but there's a bright side. Now I see, Harry, you have your hand up, but maybe you could pop it in the chat. I'm hesitant to take questions at the moment because I got a long presentation for you. So, or maybe at the break we can catch your question or put it in the chat. Thank you. On the bright side, and there is definitely a bright side here, ladies and gentlemen, is that because Canada has so much debt, we're number 2 of 33. And that GDP, okay, this is where it's interesting. GDP is actually, like our Canadian GDP, there's about 20% of it is based on real estate. And I'm going to show you some more stats on that a little bit later. But that means that we're heavily reliant on this particular aspect, on real estate, whether it's services, products, leasing, purchasing, you name it, 20%. So do you think that the government's really going to do anything super foolish to harm that industry? It's super unlikely, because then we would look foolish. We wouldn't be able to recover. We wouldn't have any GDP. So, and then we would be quite a different country. So as a result, there's some, they may do some things when it comes to interest rates, of course, but at the same time, how far can they go when this is the scenario? So that's pretty good news for us. Okay, so now we're getting into GDP. Now, again, GDP is a leading indicator when it comes to projecting down the road our rental market and our property prices. So what we're looking at today is a snapshot of GDP and all these leading indicators. And so when I put in buy signal, it means that it's a buy signal that's going to be projecting out into the future. Now, as in like 2 years, because these are all contributing to what's going to happen down the road. When I put in a hold signal, the same sort of thing that we're seeing, like, oh, okay, that might be a little bit of hold signal. And then I'm going to actually pull it all together for you at the conclusion of like, what are we doing now? So when you see a little buy signal or a hold signal, don't freak out. That's not the whole picture. And at the end of it, we're going to say, okay, this is what you actually have to do. And this is what you shouldn't do in this market. So GDP, Scotiabank came out with their forecast tables. The top one is, this is for both the US and Canada, and the top one is May, the bottom one is June 9th. So you can see that they've actually revised down quite considerably, but this is where we always have to like look at what we're hearing out there, and they're like, oh, things are lower, sure, but we're still growing. This is still positive GDP, and we're still net positive out of where we were pandemic. After all the lockdowns, shutdowns, government restrictions, these economies have recovered, and that is good news, and they're continuing to grow. So that is a buy and hold signal. Like this is good. We want to be considering, okay, we're going in the right direction. But right now, today, guess what happened? 2 years ago, we had the lowest GDP like in history. It was terrible. We had negative, what was it, 11% or something? Or I mean, they were crazy numbers. And so guess what's happening in our real estate property prices today? They're softening as a result of that GDP impact from 2 years ago. So that's how this sort of cycle works. And so we're expecting a softening in this market for the next little while. So BDC came out with the Canadian economy remains strong. GDP is up. It's lower than expected, but it's still a strong performance. It's still performing well. And this is really, really good news, especially because not only is that good news about the GDP and whatnot, but there's different areas of different services, different industries that were the hardest hit during the pandemic restrictions that are now coming back. And that is so good, because now we're going to start seeing a lift, and we actually haven't seen the shift yet because it went super into goods as being like really the most important, and of course the biggest contributor, because services were basically shut down, and now it still hasn't even gotten to the point where services have caught up. So once they do, we can see a nice economic recovery coming on a solid climb up and coming to help save the day, if you will, in terms of that economic recovery. So this is where I was talking about earlier about GDP and Canada's reliance on it. So a report by Mondor Intelligence just came out in June, and it actually, quote unquote, says Canada's economic growth is dangerously reliant on real estate. But remember what I said earlier, is that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing for real estate investors, because if our economy is reliant on it, it means that the government is probably going to do some things to support our industry. Woo, wouldn't that be a nice boost there? So they may actually protect our assets, not like, but theoretically, they should certainly protect the industry in some way, shape, or form, so that they don't adversely, negatively influence the property and real estate values. So that's very good news as well. The BDC and the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So this is actually for the U.S. So GDP. Oh, this. So GDP in the U.S. It's actually gone down. But this is Q1 2022, annualized from Q4. So I don't, and I'm going to get on this. So anyways, it was estimated at minus 1.4. It was actually even revised down to minus 1.5. So this is, not great. We've got to definitely do better in the US. GDP is slow moving data. Look at the trends. And this is what we want to talk about, is quarterly data. So when you're looking at GDP is like, it's big data. And what you want is to go, okay, we want like trends, longer term trends are very helpful. And so one quarter of a negative GDP it's not ideal, of course, but it may be, what's the best word? We don't want to act too quickly on it. But what we do want to identify here is, see, this is a hold signal, because we don't know where it's going to go and if it's going to get picked up, and maybe the summer months, whatever is happening, we want to see if the trend is being realized. It's certainly not a buy signal for real estate down the road, but we'll be watching this very, very closely. And so, and then this is where that's going, is you're probably hearing recession, and absolutely, we are going to have a recession in Canada and the US. It's a requirement for inflation, given that the governments have printed and spent all that money. We will be having some form of a recession. How deep, how long? Those are the parameters that we're getting all this information into, to support making that more of an accurate depiction and forecast. But here's what you need to know about recessions, is that it's a temporary thing, and it only requires GDP to have fallen for 2 consecutive quarters. So we've already had one, and if it continues this month, we are definitely in the next, by July, at the end of July, we'll definitely be in a recession. So let's not freak out. We're going to watch how much and why. So here's your warning. You heard it here first. The headlines are coming, and so too is winter. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, who's a Game of Thrones fan? I am. A bit. Yes. Okay. I'm seeing some people nodding their heads. Awesome. So, and Naran mentioned this earlier about the Great Parrot Effect that I came up with a little while ago. It was about in January, actually, where those headlines are going to run rampant. And whether or not there's any material substance to them, you're going to hear it. You're going to hear recession. You're going to hear the words crash. This is just, be mindful of it, and then know that you've got the data underneath it to look out long term, to understand what's actually materializing. And this is why I'm so delighted to share this with you and for you to be a part of the Real Estate Wealth Lab, because the economy is extremely important in forecasting our real estate. And I'm actually going to say but. I usually use and, but it is only one indicator. And as a result, there's these dozens of other indicators, and some that not a lot of others have actually brought into their formulas to actually see how they influence. And this is where we look at, and I'll go into it in just a moment. We look at so many, and they actually have different weights, and they have different influences, and then they influence differently. So there are some times, and Florida was a great example, actually, back in the fall, where the economy was like, it was doing fine, by the way, like it was basically through the pandemic, it was doing okay. It wasn't stellar. But because people were moving there, regardless of the economic conditions, they were just moving there. They moved that real estate market. So that's what I mean. That's an actual tangible example, and one that's recent, where some indicators might actually influence the real estate market more at a particular time. So this too shall pass. And then just a reminder, and for those who haven't seen this before, why a recession is, first of all, because the governments, yes, Canada and the US, printed a ton of money, put it into circulation, and as a result, this is what happens. And what I called it the life jacket economy. It was buoyed up by all this printed money, and now the life jacket economy is deflating because it was buoyed so heavily by this, really money that wasn't really rounded and rooted on something. And why this is important to your real estate, don't you worry, is because of inflation. That's what happens when we have inflation, printing of money, when the economy is not doing so hot, means you have inflation. And what you need to know is that is actually a buy signal. So you're kind of hearing like, well, is this a buy signal or is this a hold signal? Well, we don't know how inflation is really going to go, but I can tell you it's going a lot higher and going for a lot longer than anybody, and I will get to that anyone is talking about. So as a result, because inflation is a pretty significant buy signal, this is a time to really consider how that would impact your real estate. And so here we are when it comes to GDP. The US is sort of, it's not quite, it's negative for a quarter. So it's down a little bit. And then Canada, we've got it going up. And so that's now in 2 years from now, okay, the US market could be affected, but it doesn't necessarily. We have to put all of it together and see the full picture. So for jobs, Canada's unemployment rate drops to record low of 5.1%. I am laughing because you're going to laugh in just a moment. Bear with me, I hope anyway. So employment is up 135,000 jobs. Job gains 39,000 in May, more than expected. Unemployment 5.1, record low, and it's trending down. And wages are up. That's amazing. Now, you want to have basically all of those plus participation rate and labor, a couple of other ones, but that's a really good, robust picture of the employment situation. Now, anybody remember the labor crisis? The labor shortage crisis that was 4 months ago, maybe even 3 months ago. Oh my gosh, the labor shortage crisis. Well, we actually did a really solid look at it in January. It's in your Real Estate Wealth Lab member portal. And I highly recommend you go back, because I have to ask a serious question, and I asked it back then, but now we're at record employment numbers. Record, that's pre-pandemic everything record. How can jobs and employment be at those record levels when literally 3 months ago we had extreme labor shortages? And I can tell you that, sure, maybe, immigration borders have opened up, et cetera, but that's not sufficient because there was such a backlog in actually processing times. So anyway, something doesn't fit, have a go and check this out, and you can understand that there was not data to support that labor shortage crisis or that hypothesis at that time. And there you go. That was another great parrot effect. We heard it all over the headlines, and it didn't exist. So I'm glad you're here. The U.S. job market, also it's still hot. Employment up 400,000. Total year-over-year gain 6.5 mil. Unemployment is the same, 3.6, but that's a historical low, so that's pretty wild. And long-term unemployed is declining. So again, similarly, the Great Parrot effect occurred in the U.S. as well, and we're not seeing really that labor shortage, and it's definitely headed in the right direction. This is the U.S. labor market continues to expand. All right, what this means for real estate. And they're getting into a little area here. It's quite interesting. What this means for industry. There we are. Sorry. My camera went a little fuzzy. I wanted you to see this. So jobs are a leading indicator, as I mentioned, and they forecast our economic when they're combined with our economy and the population and interest rates and some other things, inflation, etc. They can forecast the rent and property prices in 1 to 2 years, generally speaking, because we've seen cycles as short as 6 months. So this is what we need to be looking at. And so as a result, when we have job growth, when it expands and we've got more jobs, which we have both in Canada and the US, and record level employment numbers and unemployment numbers and all this stuff, that's fantastic. That puts pressure on rents and property prices upwards. So that's what we're expecting a little bit down the road. And it's pretty significant number. So this is very, very, record numbers. Listen to that, record numbers. So what can we expect for our real estate? Again, it's only one indicator, but think about that in 2 years. Oh yeah. But now we've got to weigh this in a little bit differently now. Jobs are also in these unusual circumstances, which we are in, after having just gone through and printed all that money and the life jacket economy. Jobs are also a leading indicator forecasting interest rates going up and a recession. In this case, because we're in this particular time with all of these indicators doing all this weird stuff that they're doing and how they're interacting. So the job growth in this case could also put downward pressure on our rents and properties as interest rates go up, and then we have a recession, and recessions generally don't help our real estate values. So we've got these one indicator and two very different interactions that are going on. Are you guys ready for a brand new effect? It's like highly economic, academic terms out here. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's called the kids in a bathtub economic effect. And if you're wondering, yes, that's in the right-hand corner up at the top. That's me and my brother. And I don't know about you, but as a kid, get in the tub. Look at these cute little gems at the bottom. Like they look like they're just about to have like a rustle, a tumble in there. And yes, they're going to be splashing that water all over the place, and each kid is going to be making a mess. And the waves get bigger and bigger, and they're going this way and that way, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. And in other words, it's kind of a way of looking at reverberation. And the different indicators are these kids, and these kids are just going all over. They're going bonkers. And so what we're going to see for the next little while is this. I should have made it a little bit easier to see. If you look at those black lines of like, this is going up way, 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 and this is going down, and then this, and then this, and then it's just going to feel like a roller coaster of activity, and indicators are going all amok. But this is where we start to be able to refine, and we have already been doing this since we started in September with our very first event, is that we were able to put all of this together, and of course we refine it every time we do this. So we're actually looking at about a decade with, as I mentioned back in September, a small softening in 2023 and 2024. So we do want to be planning for the long term, and I'll talk about that short term in a minute. But as you can see, reverberation, all these kids in the bathtub, and that's really what you're going to be feeling out there. And I want to make sure that you know that we've got it and we're handling it and we understand how they're interacting. And you know what? At some point, one of those kids, one of the indicators is actually, I'm going to move it over here, is actually going to slow down, and it's going to start going in a different direction. And then it will be able to see exactly where it's going. But literally right now, our economy has all the indicators in that bathtub making a complete disaster. And once we see which indicator tires out first, we'll be able to see how these factors truly play out. And that is what we call market reverberation. And so stay tuned for that. So then when we look at and we apply jobs to our current real estate cycle formula, forecasting out into the future, the jobs are in both Canada and the US they're actually showing a little bit more. The record, so they should be higher in terms of that, the arrow going straight up, but you get the idea. Those are positive. So as a result, that's going to help, that will speed up a particular cycle time, a duration. So now on to people. Again, another leading indicator. We're seeing that this talks about a slowdown, but not a crash. But it's not really. They're talking about the real estate market and the population impacts. So it's not a slowdown of people, is what I'm trying to communicate. So the Gen Zs, they're about ages 10 to 26 right now. And I'll talk about it in a minute. What this is showing is that the stats are showing that from an immigration perspective, millennials and Gen Zs, like the older Gen Zs, are immigrating to Canada and to the US also, like that's a good age bracket. We're starting to see them come in, and they're those first-time home buyers. And it's counterbalancing, yes, counterbalancing, just like as I was describing, some of the interest rate challenges in terms of them going up and affordability. And so what we want to see is from a real estate investor or and with our clients and whatnot, is that it's going to have an impact on demand, increasing demand, because we've got a cohort that in Canada is actually predicted to be or forecasted to be bigger than the baby boomers. Yeah. Now, the millennials almost made it bigger than the baby boomers, but the Gen Zs are expected to. So you can imagine that'll increase pressure on rentals and properties. And then preferences, no matter what, even if they aren't your client your target client market, you will still want to know what they want, because it's going to influence real estate, what it looks like, what amenities it has, with transportation hubs around them. And definitely if they are your clients, which in my case, they certainly are. I love international student rentals. So totally, I gotta be making sure that I've got an eye on the prize as to what is that they need. Wi-Fi included, and all these other smart technology type things. So you'll want to check that out, especially as they're going to be a major demographic influence. And again, the reason that it's even more important is because of in Canada, we have a very, very high immigration target. So think in terms of immigration and who's coming in, think a little differently. There's some Gen Zs that are going to be there. And it is similar for the US, although the percentage of immigrants is quite a bit less, so it'll have less influence, but still something to look at. So we looked at immigration to the US and the 10 most attractive states for immigrants. So why does this matter to you? First of all, the criteria is just that they looked at hospitable states specifically for immigrants. And so the percentage that they looked at was percentage of residents not born in the US, the difference in the average of annual income between citizens versus immigrants, and the percentage of residents with a bachelor's degree among citizens and immigrants, so in terms of education. And they put all that together, and this is the list. Drum roll, please. Here it is. So we've got California, Alaska, West Virginia, New York, New Jersey, Nevada, Florida, Hawaii, and Maryland. All right, some of those places look like they'd be great places to go and live or invest, I would say. Now, this guides our market research, of course. It's increasing people, and that means there'll be an increase in rents and property down the road, because if they're attractive to individuals who are immigrating and immigration is on the rise, guess what? More people are more likely, particularly immigrants, to move to these particular locations. So it's just something to consider and to look into if that's an area of interest to you. So that was the people. Again, one of the leading indicators that we look at. And in all cases, they're growing, we're expanding, immigration targets are, being upped and all of these things. And then we look at interest. And yes, interest can be, it is a leading indicator of other indicators that are also leading indicators. Oh, it's so fun. All right, are you confused yet? This is Scotiabank, our forecast tables. I just wanted to show you the policy rates. This is both for Canada and the US. They're on the rise, you know that. We're definitely expecting more. We're expecting higher, stronger, faster, you name it, in terms of interest rates. The Bank of Canada just upped theirs. I had this in my head. It was June. Yeah. Oh, it's June 1st. I did have it. So it's June 1st. And that went up another 0.5. And similarly in the US, I think it was June 13th. They went up. Yeah. Or June 15th, rather. They also went up in terms of their interest rates. Now, this is I don't need to get into it. We know how this impacts our mortgages, but it doesn't always impact our mortgages at exactly this amount. So just be mindful that the banks are independent, they're their own businesses, and they can set their mortgage rates at whatever they want, but they typically end up coming in alignment with this to a certain degree. So inflation, where are we at with inflation? Are you bored of me talking about inflation yet? I'm so sorry, but I have some memes that I have to show you clearly. So I'll try to keep it short. CPI actually, I'll slow down. So for those of you who haven't heard me rant about inflation, please go into your rule member portal. And for the last, every single research lab, you'll want to check it out. And I've got a link in here as well to the January one where I really unpack inflation. So I think that's in this next coming slides. So I don't have to repeat myself for those who have heard it. But basically, you're in the right place, and we seem to keep on forecasting where and how long inflation is going to be around for. And in fact, I did in the January one. All right. So anyway, where am I? I'm in the US. Here we go. CPI for May in the US is up. It's the last one was previously it was 8.3. Now it's 8.6 in terms of the inflation rate. In Canada, the inflation rate has it's moved from 6.88 in April to 7.7 in May. That's in 1 month. Yeah. So Canadian inflation is the highest since 1983. That's in 4 decades, basically. And again, this is where it gets, I am gonna go on a rant. Dawn, I love your question. I'm just gonna take it. Yes, your question is California was on the list of locations that were great for immigrants, but it was based on those 3 criteria of the education discrepancy, the wage basically discrepancy, and one other factor in terms of like making it an amenable and nice place, hospitable place for immigrants to live based on those 3 conditions. And I love your question because that's exactly why we have, Vincent, our chief technology officer, working in the background so that we can get all those weighted levers of all those indicators, because taxes, and it is absolutely huge. And it's definitely something that we look at when we do our complete analysis. And in fact, in Edmonton today, when you look at the market analysis for Edmonton, I talk about taxes and how it's impacting, and it's one of the levers. So it's very, very important. Okay. Tara, you missed the rants. Well, you're just in time. All right. Yes, here we are with this friggin' inflation, the highest since 1983 in the US and in Canada. It's all record everything. And this time they said that the market consensus was going to be 7.4% for May. And it went above it, 7.7%. Well, no surprise there that they're not quite getting it wrong. And by market consensus, this is typically the market consensus of chief economists at financial institutions. So I want to remind you of this exact slide was up in Rule at our presentation in January at a research lab. And the market consensus then was that inflation will flatten. It will disappear by the end of 2022. These are quotes, disappear. And now the market consensus is 7.4. In 3 months, they changed. So they were also saying supply chain issues. And then I've got another little situation. I was listening to an economist on a video today, and I thought I was going to share it in the Rural newsletter that went out. I was like, this could be good. I was like, I can't share this. There isn't, no disrespect. Like, if this gets out there and that I am actually like schooling you that supply chain is not a part of inflation, I was like, you know what? You didn't get it. You didn't get it. We're done. And so sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but you didn't get that video in your Rural newsletter because the rant would have been so long, you wouldn't have known what to do with yourself. So you're getting it now. So now inflation is rising above the market consensus. You don't say. We called it in January at a minimum, and I think even earlier, to be honest, in terms of where inflation was coming in. But we knew this. And guess what? We know, and you know now too, that it is going to be around for a long time. I don't have the exact dates and slides in here this time because, again, I've ranted on this many times. But here's the thing. Inflation is a leading indicator and it is a lagging indicator. And what that means is that inflation is going to be impacted when interest rates go up, when the government stops printing money. The government has only slowed down in printing money. And when I say the government, I mean on both sides of the border. Okay, we're just generalizing here, probably around the world. So if they haven't stopped printing money, I am getting into that. They haven't stopped printing money, then we've got a problem. So we're going to see inflation until that stops. And by the way, even if they were to stop printing money right now, and they were to increase interest rates to a maximum amount, guess how long it takes for inflation to be affected? 2 years. It's a lagging indicator by 2 years. That's if all of that were to happen right now. So if we extrapolate and use our critical thinking, okay, things are slowing down, interest rates are slowly climbing up, you know, like we're looking at least like four years, maybe, like buckle up, not just for my rant, but buckle up for inflation and expect it. So this is a link, again, to go through inflation, unpacked what it is, what causes it, what cures it, and how long it will last. And if you need a cheat sheet, I've got all the hints right there. So you can take a picture, and when you're at a cocktail party or whatever, because now we're allowed to go out, is you can actually go and say, hey, this is what's actually happening behind the scenes. So we got you. And it's important, again, for real estate professionals, especially, to know it even more, because it is so important when it comes to real estate values. And real estate, again, is one of the most stable assets and one of the assets that typically outpaces inflation. And you're going to see me writing this and communicating it over and over again. And I believe in it. And it's just something that we've seen through history as well. Okay, so why are so many people getting inflation wrong? Most are just trained incorrectly, or they've trained about it and then, I don't know, they've forgotten it. And I don't mean you folks, I mean what we're hearing on the news and things like this. So just be mindful of that. And I'm going to move on. Inflation, though, is a tax, and you do need to stop printing that money. You just do. So this was some great, some solutions. So this is from the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii. It just came out the other day. And while it's specific to Hawaii, they actually look at it from a macroeconomic perspective. So I just kind of took out the Hawaii bits, and I'm like, hey, this needs to happen at a federal level as well. And so truly, some of these solutions are: you cut regulations that discourage growth, because we need growth. You reform restrictive occupational licensing laws so more people can find work, make it easier. Another one, now, I don't know that, I'm not sure if they've recommended this, it wasn't in that, but I do know, and I was starting to look at economists about opening up borders and having open immigration, because that's where you're gonna, like, that's a 6-month backup, a 9-month backup. Will we get the skills where they need to be? Who cares? We're one, anyways. Reduce business costs and encourage entrepreneurship, reform land use and home building regulations to spur housing supply, right? Like, oh my gosh, is it today's? I forget, or it might be next week's newsletter. Oh my, I can't remember if it was for today or if it was next week in terms of the timing of when it came out, but I'll give you a little sneak peek. Vancouver just got, there was an announcement of a 40% increase on glass in windows. 40% increase. Now, that was today. Okay, awesome. All right. Thanks, Paige. I mean, like, okay. And then it goes through and it's like lumber's up 83% or whatever the number is these days, and like the 63% and da 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 da. And then you add in like these other complexities, like that's going to affect building homes. It's going to affect condos. Oh my goodness. And renovations and flips and all that stuff. So that definitely does not help our housing supply. So what does that mean for you, real estate investors? The supply situation isn't going to be improved. So guess what? Demand. And that's another component of our real estate cycle formula, that you got to get the supply and the demand factors in there in a really material way. So when I talk about, again, like this sort of long-term expansionary phase with a softening in 23, 24, we're seeing a little bit of it now. We're really like, there's a lot of factors to consider and how they interplay, and hang out in the bathtub. Anyway, and cut taxes. Okay, so again, this is a great way to end inflation, stop printing money. And as Milton Friedman says, inflation is always and everywhere a result of too much money, of a more rapid increase in the quantity of money than of output. And as I said earlier, that was it. So when you hear, I just, again, like this video today, a major economist explaining what happened with inflation. And he went straight into supply chain, straight into the war in Ukraine, straight into the parrot effect, without looking at, we just printed trillions of dollars between Canada and the US. So there you are. Oh, and I think I've got that. I'm sorry, pardon me. I can get back here. Well, there you go. I'll just jump to here. So as you know, what you do in these kinds of circumstances with what we're seeing is you actually want to be investing. They're double buy signals. All things being equal. Ceteris paribus. So the rental market, cool. So now the rental market, and now I've moved out of some of the key leading indicators. There's others, but talked about those. Now we're into some of the lagging indicators. And these are ones that, excuse me, I wouldn't make buying decisions on. I wouldn't make selling decisions on. I wouldn't make hold decisions on. But they're important for us to know kind of like what's materializing in the market. And then there are also, of course, validation and credibility of what we saw those leading indicators actually make it do. So they're kind of the outcome, they're the result. So rental market, just some stats in June that they're trending up. April 2022 up 9% year over year. May 2022 up 10.5% year over year. So these are right on track, upwards in line with the leading indicators last year. Because remember, we had major upswings in I shouldn't say major. Our economic activity in 2020 was crap. In 2021, it was going up, even though it wasn't impressive and it had a long ways to go and things like this, and it didn't necessarily feel comfortable, but it was going up. And as a result, this is exactly where these things should be. 100%, they should be going up. Rent should be going up. So these are on track. And what I wanted to show here is, because I did show this last month, but I showed the May data, and it's kind of fun to see things next to each other. So the first one here, this first, you can see my mouse, 1, 2, 3, down to 7, that was in May. And this is the change of the ranking in June 2022. And I just want to point out something about this whole Burnaby situation. So I own in Burnaby, and I discovered Burnaby from an economic and an investing perspective back in 2018. And I applied all like the 75 indicators, and Burnaby actually ended up ranking one of the top in British Columbia in terms of areas to invest. And I just thought, nobody was talking about Burnaby. And holy cow, I have to tell you, pay attention. Wait until we get more market research coming your way. Can't wait. So this one's for the US, just the average rent by year. It's nationally, again, by the way, just to be clear, I know I'm talking, this is the macroeconomic section. This is just giving you a litmus test, and you need to actually go into the city specific, which we'll be doing on Edmonton in just a moment. Anyway, so average rent in the US is rising. And again, these are lagging indicators. So you don't really make a decision. So it's just kind of a hold signal, if you will, like don't do anything with this information, really, other than to use your market rents and up them if you need to in your particular location. So the property market in the US, again, we're not making any decisions on it. It's kind of a hold. So inventory is up the first time since 2019. The prices, a new high has been set, up another 17% year over year. Up 35% since 2020. Days on market, new low, 31 days. It's down six year over year, and down 40 since 2020. This data would suggest that we're at the end of an expansionary phase, like getting pretty close to the expansionary phase ending and into, guess what? The real estate cycle coming into a recession stage. Absolutely. And that is exactly why we've been saying that we're going to be experiencing a softening of the market. And why we're using that as a softening of the market is because there's a chart in just a moment. It's for Canada, but it'll help you understand that. So I'll just show you, here's your days on market, down 40 since 2020. Median listings, here's the data. You can get it in the member portal if you'd like it. And it's up 35% since 2020. So yeah, you heard this, huh? Is there a real estate crash on the horizon? Price declines about 10%, still not over recent gains. It's still not up, or still up, pardon me, over recent gains. And I wanted to get to that. I'm just gonna jump ahead. This is the report that I wanna show you to do that. And here we are. we're freaking out about, is it going to crash? Are we at a recession, et cetera, et cetera. However, yeah, we're seeing at softening. Home prices are expected to fall. Yes, but not right now. This is right now. This is not in the future. I'm talking now, but not likely as much as they rose during the pandemic. So again, all the different areas, it depends, and you know your neighborhoods and things like this, but it's something that like there's so many fundamentals and indicators that are putting upward pressure that it will support it. And this is what we want to look at is net results. And so they're going to kind of stabilize at, you know, they're going to go down, but they're going to stabilize, and they're still going to have been like higher than they were. And that's good. And then the softening will happen for a couple of years, and then they're going to go over a long term upwards. So there is a little bit potentially a buying opportunity right now, in a little bit as they soften a bit more. But if you find that you've got a good property, there's other little factors in play here, and that is called inflation and interest rates. So interest rates are going to go up. Inflation is going to go up. So your properties are at minimum going to go up with the rate of inflation, which is minimum like 10% at the end of the year. So that's notwithstanding all the other appreciation factors. Okay, I'm almost through this. We're almost done with this section. So here's, if you want them in your member portal, 5 best Canadian cities for affordability and job growth. There they are. Edmonton, we're about to do next. And what we like about this list, again, you want to use these as places like affordable and job growth. That's great. That's awesome. We want to be looking for those kind of markets, but make sure you actually do your complete diligence. More is better. And our real estate cycle formula, we look at over 24. Our comprehensive market analysis, we look at over 75 indicators. And you definitely can use these things to help you narrow your research, but you need to be looking at that or coming to us. So here in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, beware of confidence crushing headlines. It's gonna feel ugly. Crashing real estate, downward revisions on prices, hiking interest rates, affordability challenges, all of that is just going to be like all over. Yeah, Mark, a minimum of 10% for the year in terms of inflation, because in Canada, I should say, maybe like 8 in the US, but we'll see. And I would say that I'm reserving my right to increase that. I'm just not saying the number that I actually think it's going to be. I'm being conservative on purpose. But let's put it this way. Mark, I was saying 8 in January when the economists were saying 0. Or flat, I should say. So not 0, so 2. So you kind of get, yeah. I guess I'm saying I'm trying not to be wrong or something, but yeah, it could be 15. Yeah, it could. And I'll dig into that a little bit further, and I'll give you guys a proper, and see, and that's just it. They're saying 10%. Ron, thanks. So Ron saying, I attended a CMHC presentation and they're calling for 10% inflation in residential in next year. Care comment. Yeah, I think that's low. Given how much money was printed and circulated when the economy was garbage, based on economics 101, and I'm not even an economist, I'm just like a schmuck on a webinar here. Really, but some basics, just like there is definitely a lot more pressure in this inflation. And the interest rates, I mean, where were they 2 years ago? Because it takes 2 years to implement. So this is runaway, because even if they do the interest rates right now, that's going to take 2 years to impact. So there's nothing holding inflation back right now. You see what I'm saying? Like nothing. And the only thing outside of the parameters that they do have available to them, they being the central banks have available to them to do something with, is a recession. That's the only cure. So it's not pretty. But don't freak out, because for real estate investors, that's another reason why we're placing that sort of buy signal, even though in normal conditions, we might be like, yo, this is kind of like more of a hold. The real estate properties are going to go down. But hey, they might go down, but this might be an inflationary ride that you might not want to miss either. I don't know. Take that into consideration. Okay. All right. Thanks for the support there, Tara and Ron. I love it. Okay. So inflation, yes. At a minimum, that lack of supply, expanding population. See, we still haven't even talked about, I haven't even actually done like a full meal deal on the lack of supply. And I'm kind of excited to do that at some point and reveal, like, I've touched on it and how bad we are in Canada and in the US, but there's some studies out there that are pretty deep, and I'd love to go into that. So then we can even place more of a weight or an emphasis on that supply. Oh my gosh, I am just going over time. Sorry. So just remember that this is kids in a bathtub, economic effect. We're reverberating all over the place. It's absolutely wild and crazy out there, but we got you. We've weighted them. Yes, I have spreadsheets for this. And yes, Vincent's got it in tech and is working on getting it in tech. And here's our conclusions, is that it is validating that our real estate cycle formula is robust, it works. We are expecting a long, modest expansionary phase for like a decade, but there is a softening right now in 23, 24, and 2022, 23, 24. We are expecting this. We've been saying it for a while. This is going to happen. So it's definitely a hold time, but also potentially a buy time. But we're getting back to the very beginning. All those leading indicators today, minus the fact that there's potentially a recession, but all the leading indicators are showing a buy for 2 years down the road. Actually, a little sooner. So I want to get it before then. Okay, so here's some actions of do's and don'ts. Do not do fix and flips right now. Do not do rent to owns. I mean, of course, by the way, these are broad. If you know what you're doing with rent to owns and you've got a long horizon, maybe you do a rent to own for 10 years. Perfect. Like there's so many different ways. So again, it's just a caution. Just be mindful of that. And do buy and hold is a great thing. And here's the list. But at this time, due to macroeconomic factors and a softening 2023-24, you want to exercise extra caution. That's the caveat with the rent to owns and fix and flips. All right. Mark, you're literally putting a flip for sale in 4 days. Yeah, do it now. That's awesome. All right. So that was our conclusion for our macro section. Over to you, Naran.
Well, Jennifer, okay, everybody stop and breathe. That was a lot of stuff. But one of the reasons why we have so much of information coming at you right now is because there is this sense of a storm happening in the market. And so because of that, we really need to show up and provide for you the information. A couple things, Jennifer, while I know that you're just going to rest your voice for a minute, but as you do, I want to disagree with you on one thing. And that is that you are not a schmuck on a webinar, because if you were, that gives us all, we're all like little schmucks. So
my apologies. I didn't mean that in any way, shape, or form to reflect anyone else. I just wanted to be self-deprecating that they're,
No, Jennifer, like we all show up because of your brilliance. So I just want to put that out there. Secondly, I want you to stop for a minute and just think about what we have just heard. I mean, just if you are starting off in real estate and you're beginning on this game, guess what? You're going to be thinking about what the media and what realtors and mortgage brokers and just not the good ones, but just the average people tell you. They all live in the world of the lagging indicator, not the leading one. We are bringing you the leading indicators and telling you, hey, be mindful of the lagging ones, because it's easy to talk about market rents right now. It's easy to talk about a price drop. It is difficult to see what's going on and tell you what we are doing right now for the future. So if you are joining us, a couple problems that we solve. If you're a beginner and you don't know where to start or what process to follow, we've got you. And if you're in this Zoom meeting today and you're feeling overwhelmed, that's okay. I have been there, and that's all right. You just stay with us. We will take you along. We will hold your hand. We will help you understand. If you are experienced and you are feeling stuck or not sure what to do right now, especially given what's going on in the market, it's all right. We're in it together. Number of us here on this call are highly experienced real estate investors, and we feel the pain on a day-to-day basis. We're figuring it out, not just for you, but for ourselves as well. If you are next level, then access to deals and strategies and how to exit, this is what we provide. Now, if you are a beginner, I just want to point out that Wendy Bradley and myself, so I'm the guy, you'll recognize me by my bald head, and Wendy by her good looks. So we have just started a 10-week program, a coaching program that walks you through what we call the rule book. It's a real estate investing starter's guide with coaching. It's to help you understand the fundamentals and the basics of real estate investing so that you can really understand the market and be able to move forward with confidence without having to, every time the wind blows one direction, without you feeling jostled. So if you are interested in that, it is not too late. Come join me, join Wendy. It is every Thursday night at 7:30 for an hour and a half. And if you scan this QR code right now, it will take you to a landing page for you to sign up with us. Especially if you are new, this is not for the investor that's got 40 doors under them. This is for new investors. You're starting off and you want to just understand the fundamental basics of it. Make sense? Again, you can scan this QR code as well. This is for the events that we've got coming up on July 13th, July 20th, and July 27th, and the 22nd of June, I guess. What do we got next? To join our next event, you can go to realestatewealthlab.com. If you need to get in touch with any of us for any reason, info@realestatewealthlab.com. And you can also find us on Instagram. Now, Jennifer, one of the things that I have decided to do just while we've been walking through this is I have a property that I was thinking of flipping, and the tenants are vacant. I'm not. Instead, I'm going to re-rent it. Especially because given that inflation is going to overperform all indicators, I think it's the right move to do.
I have a question for you, Naren.
Sure, go for it.
Are you thinking of like a refinance, like a BRRRR or a flip might not be the best strategy right now. However, I am going to suggest it's maybe something to consider. I don't know what quality your state it is in, but obviously you're thinking of renovating it, right?
Yes.
So in that case, I mean, shit. I mean, I said sorry. Like if glass and windows have just gone up 40% and inflation is going up further, that's also something to consider too. Like maybe a smaller, depending on where it is or the condition, like maybe a smaller kind of like the lipstick renovation that will get you past like some hopes.
So Jennifer, this is going to be the secret gold nuggets for people that are listening that are doing it. Here's my plan on this building.
Awesome.
I can duplex this property, but I'm not going to, because the cost of renovation right now does not justify the numbers, right? It doesn't work. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to paint the place and change some lights. And I'm going to put a second kitchen, a small kitchenette in the basement. And there's a fourth bedroom. And I will turn around and rent this to a multi-generational family for a much higher rent, because now you have parents living on the main level and the son living on the basement.
Awesome.
And this allows me to do it at a much cheaper, lower budget, gets a higher rent, but also solves a problem in the market.
Huge affordability. Family multi-generational housing is actually on the rise. So congratulations. It's good. That was top tip, pro tip.
Thank you. Reno's starting a week.
Where is it?
Kitchener.
Okay. For those of you who are interested in Kitchener and learning more about that, we did Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge. And it's in your Real Estate Wealth Lab member portal. And we did that in a little while ago. So it's a fairly up-to-date market analysis.
Jennifer, we are going to go look at Edmonton now.
Yeah, now we're going to go look at Edmonton. You ready
Exciting.
for this?
This
is a lot of data, guys. Yeah. So listen, what I do is I put in a ton of data so that you have this and you have this presentation, you have the video, you can PDF it, you can copy it and put it into please mention Real Estate Wealth Lab. That would be nice. Your little friend, Jennifer Hunt over here, when you're sourcing it, we'd appreciate that. But you don't have to redo the material. So you get it, you can have access to it, etc. And so I didn't want to, while I'm not going to necessarily talk to everything, because that's a lot, you're at least going to have the data that you would need in order or potentially want to see listings or days on market, etc., etc. So you will have that. Harry, market has dipped 10 to 15% from March. And I had asked the question if we can see it coming. Yes. Same way, another 10% dip after July hike. It's kind of terrible for the sense of refinancing and valuation when you see a little bit more stability. Oh, okay. So Harry, what I'm suggesting is that, well, it depends on which market. And yes, we are seeing some fluctuations. The thought process at this time is that over the long term, it's going to stay, it's going to be slowly, modestly climbing. But this next sort of 2.5 years, it is going to drop, but it's still going to be higher than pre-pandemic. So depending on when you purchased, it's really about when you purchased your properties. And how long you're going to hold them. If you purchase your properties at the height of the pandemic or in the pandemic, yeah, it's going to feel funky for sure. They might go down a little bit, but not over the long term. So this is because the fundamentals are there for growth. We just had a little bit of a challenge. We had a very interesting time because we were on the lagging. I hope that answers your question. I better get into Edmonton or you guys will be really bad. Okay, here we go. Who wants to invest in Edmonton? All right, I do. So here's a couple of, when we do our market analysis, we've done them in the US and in Canada. Here's a couple of samples of what we've done in terms of the cities. As you can see, it's a wide breadth and reach all over North America. If you have a city that you want looked at, yes, send it in. info@realestatewealthlab.com. And guess what? We've got a list. So let us know what you want. Oh, I'd like to know, next month, we're thinking of doing something on short-term rentals. So if there's a particular market that you think is good for vacation rentals, short-term rentals, that type of thing, that might be kind of fun. So we're going to unpack that a little bit. So again, we look at 23, 24 indicators. This is that real estate cycle. And yes, this is where Edmonton is, but let me get to it. GDP. All right. So what you want to do is always look at, so we've done the macros. Okay, so we kind of know where the market's going. Now we're going to look at Canada, and then we're going to look at the province, and then we look at the city. And so Canada's GDP in 2021, Canada's 4.8, Alberta was 5.1, Edmonton was 5.7. That's all rad. Way to go, Edmonton. And Vincent's from Edmonton. And so and there's lots of you on here from Alberta. Pop it in the chat. If you're a Crystal, it's awesome. You're in Red Deer. No, Tara, you're out that way. Leduc. All right. So let's have some fun with these. The GDP for Canada for 2022 forecast is 4.3, Alberta 4.7, and Edmonton 5.3. This is what you want to be looking at in terms of better than. So Edmonton's better than the rest of Alberta. Not the rest of, pardon me, there's other cities, but the average of Alberta. So that's good. What we're showing here, though, is there's still a bit of room from that height of the pandemic restrictions. So when things were closed and locked down to a certain extent, what happened is that it went down so far that we still have a little ways to get actually to net zero. It's still at minus 1.2 for a net zero GDP impact from the depths of the pandemic. So that's why we look at net. But it is growing and expanding, and it's got lots on its way. So that's fantastic. And so you can see here now, as we look at 2021 versus 2020-22, the net real GDP growth, it's still growth, but it's showing that change. a little bit of a down, if you will, but it is still growth. So now what we want to do is look at this from the perspective of this isn't a buy signal for the future. It kind of is because it's growth, it's positive growth, but it could be something that we need to watch more closely. Like if this becomes a recession, if this becomes longer than a recession, which is only 2 quarters. So that's what we kind of want to see there. Okay. In the headlines, the Epic Times shows that Alberta is not, oh, this was fascinating. Alberta is not dominated by oil and gas. There's a Fraser Institute study. So I mean, this was one of the news articles that came out about it. But holy cow, this study is remarkable. I think I go into it on the next slide. So not only is this totally like the myth is just completely debunked. So look at this. Alberta's economy is diversified already, and it's diversifying. How many times have you heard, oh, Alberta's got to diversify its economy? All the time. And I've been talking about it for years, and I've been saying, okay, particularly like when I've looked at the economic development for Calgary and Edmonton and Red Deer and Lethbridge, but Calgary and Edmonton for sure. I know we're talking about Edmonton. They have more diversity and they've got plans for diversification and whatnot. Now, we actually, as real estate investors, do like to have that diversification. But that myth was like, oh, look at it. It's a little bit Alberta. Measuring economic diversification in Canada, it's actually about the same as all the other provinces in terms of, you can see on the scale there in the graph or table, more and less. So it's actually like pretty aligned, like, Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and then Newfoundland is definitely less. So that's interesting. And so not only is it diversified already, but it's continuing to diversify. And that is really, really important for us. Oops, pardon me. Yeah, so then these are buy signals for a real estate investor, because this is something we want. This is just another graph in a different way of showing that basically that stereotype as the petrostate is a myth. Now, this article in the study is really good. It actually goes on even further. And I don't know, no, I didn't go into it because I didn't want to go into it in detail, but I will mention that they also talk, and I did in the newsletter. Yeah, go and check out in the newsletter if you want to learn more about it, because they talk in this article about, in the study, I should say, that diversification of a particular economy is not necessarily a great thing. And in my opinion, diversification, because they're talking about comparative advantage, like, why not? If Alberta has all this oil and it's this amazing like production of petro type, petroleum, et cetera, products, then why not use its comparative advantage? And I do believe in comparative advantage. And I think we should definitely be affecting that in Alberta, and that it should be having some focus on it. However, as a real estate investor, not with just the economist hat on, we want to have a diversified economy. And the reason for that is because that is the insulation, one of the leading indicators, that's the insulation around our assets. So if something does happen, like, you definitely want to leverage comparative advantage, but you don't want to, in terms of a real estate investor, you want to make sure that that economy is diversified. So just wanted to point that out, that if you're reading that newsletter, I think I'm bringing it out in there, but we want to look at it differently. That's why we're together here at the Real Estate Wealth Lab, learning and working together, because we look at data and we look at studies differently based on our assets. So Edmonton, now drilling down into Edmonton, aims to innovate to diversify its economy post the restrictions from the COVID-19 pandemic. And in this case, they're actually creating an innovative, and I think it's called an innovative entity, and that is going to cost $5 million a year for innovation. Innovation. Oh, I forgot in my inflation rant. Oh, there is one more solution to inflation. You want to know what it is? Innovation. That is actually it. Like, that is, thank you for reminding me. I'm so glad we got through this and seeing innovation there. So innovation is actually one of the key ways in order to get out of inflation. And we have inflation coming. So I'm going to come back to that in a moment when I talk about Alberta's and Edmonton's inflation. So as you can see, GDP is doing well. It is climbing. It's 5.3. That's awesome. We want to see that. So jobs, what we've got in terms of jobs and the employment, like I said, I've got a lot of stats here, but generally speaking, you'll see the trend when we get to it. So jobs are great, and up 24,000 full-time, down 12,100 part-time, the net gain of almost 12,000 in May 2022. And they're working more hours. And look at this, it's a record high. And it's completely recovered since the bottom of the pandemic, pandemic time of June 20th. So this is like, again, these buy signals are looking ahead down the path. Like this is something, a market that you're going to be wanting to be investing in. So for those of you investing in Edmonton, this is very, very good. Praveen, so better to invest in Edmonton than Calgary. Ooh, no, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. Thank you for asking that. This is a market analysis based on that particular market, where it is in its cycle, and if it's going to be a good market and perform for the long term, or whatever the cycle is going or not. Now, what you're asking, Praveen, is a ranking. And that we actually look at 75 indicators where we rank them and say, you know what? No, all things being equal, you'd want to invest in whichever one reveals itself as the top winner. And then, okay, so fine, you might choose Calgary or Edmonton. Let's say it's one or two, number one or number two, doesn't matter at the moment, but you would do that and apply that methodology and then understand where it is in its cycle so that you know when to enter, when to pull out, or when to extract. Hope that helps. So the answer is not necessarily, and we won't get into comparisons today. So this is very, very good news. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to Alan. Big shout out. I know you're out there in Edmonton. He emailed in today, and I'm so grateful that I popped it in the presentation. He said, this has got to get in the stats tonight. And so and we checked it out. So thank you. Appreciate it. This is working together. Michelle, is that 75 indicator ranking in Rule somewhere? We haven't made it available. Well, we'll work on that. Definitely, we'll work on that. Okay, so then May 2022, of all the Canadian jobs that have been created in May, Alberta, 70% of them, and Edmonton, 30% of those of the 70%. So that's pretty amazing. And those stats, so that's good. That's a big, huge ranking up. Unemployment, it's down, which is, in this case, you want down. Down means a buy signal for unemployment. It's very good news. You can see the stats, so that's awesome. Everything's recovered from the previous pandemic stuff, restrictions. The median family income is up. And this graph here kind of stops at 2019. This is the official sort of median income household data. And it goes to 2019. That's the last official pre-COVID restrictions. So, and it was trending up, as you can see, quite a bit from 2016. And that's exactly what we were saying in terms of real estate cycle at that time, as it was just coming into like a stabilization period, which is awesome. And check this out. This is actually, I just went on to Edmonton average salary. So the average salary in Edmonton is $125,000. But look at this. In Canada, again, we want to compare. In Canada, it's $120,000. So guess what? And Alberta is $129,000. Again, that's an average. So now you want to find, okay, so where's the spot that's closer to that 129? I mean, again, it's an average, so it might be 126, 125. This might be the top market in terms of wage earning. So that is trending up, and it's higher than the national, but not the provincial. Regardless, it's still a very good number and will attract population because of the wages and that there's lots of jobs. That was thank you, Mark. This one was actually the average salary. So this previous one is the median income, and that's household. And then this one is actually the salary. So it's a little bit different in terms of how it's measured. Inflation. Remember I said innovation is the cure for inflation, along with some of those other things. So inflation, what we're seeing year over year for Edmonton is 4.6. So it's better than Canada at 4.8. It's better than Calgary It's better than Toronto, and it's better than Ottawa. What this means is it's more affordable. So now we've got that, remember that affordability survey, like study of affordability and jobs. You're seeing the data showing it, right? It's more affordable. It has a lower inflation rate than its sort of counterparts, if you will. And this is attractive. And that's a pretty high salary, like an average salary of a 125, and that median income is household income is pretty good. So all these things are buy signals, and what they're doing is indicating the strength and the foundations of the market down the road. Yeah, Mark, they're totally different metrics from totally different sources, and it's kind of hard to, and there's also a time lag in between them. So, because that 2019 was previously. So I hear what you're saying, and they're not really apples to apples. How's that? So what you want to look at now is, okay, so we just looked at some of the inflation. Inflation is going up, but it's going less up than others. So, okay, that's something that's going to be moving this affordability needle and what we look at there. And then the political climate and taxes. So thanks for bringing up taxes earlier. This is definitely in the real estate cycle formula because we have to pay attention to taxes and how they impact us. And so, oh, did I do it? I think I did. Oh, yay. I like it when awesome. Canadian property tax benchmark report for 2021. And I know that's 2021, but regardless, you get a sense of it. This is how Edmonton ranked. So it's above the average. And Calgary is below, and this is for residential property taxes. So that's something. And then no HST in Alberta. Yeah, for sure. So these are the property taxes. But in Edmonton, drilling down a little bit further, is that they did just approve a 1.9% property tax increase for 2022. So you'll notice down the little sort of icon, if you will, that's something that you would want to avoid. You don't want to really be around and investing in locations that are constantly putting raising property prices or putting property taxes, raising property taxes. You don't want that. You don't really want them to be, having a lot of government influence and permits and things like that. You want to avoid those kinds of things. However, the reality is that property taxes go up. And then what you'd want to do is evaluate 1.9% property tax compared to other cities with their property taxes, and is it higher or lower? Because probably, here's an example. I forget the year. Let's call it probably like 2017, 2018-ish. City of Vancouver increased their property taxes by 7%. Okay, so 1.9% is looking pretty attractive. So while you want to avoid that concept, you want to also know that that's going to happen. So then we put in a little taxes, see how that's going down and weighted down. All right, people. What's going on with Edmonton and its people? So here we are. It's in terms of immigration, net migration, population growth rate is better than Canada. I want to clarify, pardon me. This is population growth rate. It is not necessarily net migration. This includes all of it. Net migration. It also includes births and deaths. So wanted to make sure I clarified that. Slow down. So it's better than Canada, but it's a little bit lower than Alberta at 1.1. So I kind of put that as like that's a flat. And yes, they have a really, really big, important play. Like I said earlier, like when Florida had all those people moving and they didn't have the economic activity at that time to quite relate. And now it's just going, it's got such incredible foundations. And similarly with Edmonton, it's got all those other pieces that are working very well, and its population, it's fairly, it's good, it's stable, it is growing. And again, it's growing better than Canada. And that's what you really want to look at. So that means that people are going and choosing Edmonton. So that's positive, that's in our favor. Now it's down a little bit because you can see that it was previously like pretty steady. But in 2021, like obviously everything was down. People weren't moving during the height of the government imposed restrictions. And of course, 2021, they implemented, individuals who were not COVID-19 vaccinated weren't even able to travel, on planes and things like this. So there was a major, major government imposition. So that's not reflecting whether or not Edmonton's an attractive place. So the numbers, we'll have to pay attention to them. I'm not really worried about them because that's a politics and policies kind of thing that influenced that. So you have to dig into it even more. So Edmonton could be headed toward a housing supply shortage, according to some industry leaders. And what we're seeing is that Ontario, they've had such an increase in their prices and things like this that there's a lot of Ontarians, all right, folks like Naran, who are like, I'm out in Ontario. I know I'm not going to say that you're moving to Edmonton, but folks out in Ontario, all the cool kids from the East-ish, central Canada, they're going, you know what? It's expensive out here. I want to try and change things. I want to have more affordability. The job growth is there. And so they're moving, and we're seeing that it's accelerating that move to Alberta. Now, I think that this happened a number of years ago. It would have been probably in the 2000s, I think, like early. I'm talking like 20 years ago. And that Alberta did something similarly where I'm a Maritimer, so it's cool, but a whole bunch of folks from the Maritimes, what was going on with their economy, et cetera, versus what was happening in Alberta, they came out and migrated. And what we're seeing is that similar kind of circumstances with the Ontario and Alberta governments, economies. Okay, so prime home buying age, this is the age. So in terms of their median age, we're seeing that they're in that 35 to 39. And that's important because from that demographic, they're going to push more influence on infrastructure, taxes, and on buying. So the demand is going to be there. And as a result, there's going to be upward pressure on rents and the property values. Another thing about the demographics, and I talked about the Gen Zs earlier. So Gen Zs are sort of, well, I think they're like more like 10 to 26 now, but Millennials are this group of like the millennials, the younger millennials, and the older Gen Zs, because the 7-year-olds are not obviously buying properties. Well, I know a couple, but not very many. And as a result, with Edmontonians being young, and that median age is 36.8, this is like they're in prime categories. And guess what we saw earlier too, in that macro section, was that the Gen Zs are a huge portion of immigration, and immigrants are moving to Edmonton. So you see how this is going to go. So especially if you're actually in Edmonton, you're going to be wanting to make sure that your properties are appealing to that younger generation, because that's who's going to be moving in. That's who's going to be coming at your next tenant. Havan, Harry, it happened in the last oil boom in 2016. Yes, it happened in 2016. It's happened in every single oil boom for sure. And whenever a province's economy recovers really well. Havan, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Does Edmonton property appraise well now for refinance purposes? I might defer that question because I would want to get into that would really depend on when you purchased it and how much equity is in it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a tough one to just answer. What I would say is if you bought in the last little while, like I said, markets are going to be softening. Actually, let me get to the end and you'll see. I think you'll have your answer. So rents year over year. So again, now we're kind of completed in those leading, which is predicting out 2 years, 1 to 2 years. And now we're looking at what's happened. So the average rents are up 6.7% year over year. Definitely expected that because last year, GDP and the economy started to improve. So that's definitely in the line so that we can expect that. And then our rents up more than the average. No, but what we want to be looking at is, the average is down below. So 4.7% increase versus 8.5% increase in these top 35 cities across Canada. So it's like It's not as good as some other markets, but that's okay. But what you really also want to be doing if you're owning rental properties in any particular city, you really want to be looking at that month over month. That gives you like boots on the ground, what's actually happening, and it can help you. And you want to look at it monthly. So I promise that I will include these in our Real Estate Wealth Lab macroeconomics so that you can at least have it or be reminded that you got to go in and look at yours, because that's going to help you understand what's going to be, what you need to do for your tenants to keep them. Less about the market, because we'll have already forecasted that that market is going to go down, but you'll be able to actually implement it and see like right away, catch it quickly. All right, so then rent price is expected to keep rising in Calgary and Edmonton this year. Absolutely, because guess what? We've seen GDP growth continue to increase. So that's definitely on track, and we definitely expect that as well. Here's some forecasts. There's just not enough rentals. This is something that we've seen in a lot of different places, and Edmonton is no different. There's insufficient supply. And for those of you who are in Edmonton, I mean, feel free to weigh in with like what you're seeing. It's like, you know, boots on the ground, and that there's more renters than there are properties, stiff competition, et cetera, et cetera. So again, this is one of the many factors that are putting upward pressure on rent prices, et cetera. So when it comes to vacancy rate and the rent rates, Canada, the vacancy rate is 3.1% and rent is 1,167. So again, this is a lot of data, and I know it, but this is what you need to do your market analysis. So here it is, and this is how you make smart decisions in real estate. So in Edmonton, the vacancy rate is 7.3%, and this is just for purpose-built rentals. You can dive into like condo data and stuff like that, but just for brevity, keeping it down. Wanted to keep it down. And vacancy. Oh, thanks, Zoria, saying rents are going up at least 100 on renewal or turnover on our properties. Awesome to hear. Exactly. We're expecting that rent to continue, and we're seeing it like continue year over year to go up. But right now, a little bit of down, a slight decline, and we'll check that out. The vacancy rate is higher than the national by quite a bit. So to me, it seems like there may not be, like based on this data, it seems to me like this may not be the actual case insofar as insufficient supply. However, it also specifically says suitable place to live. And suitable might be more about the property type or how it's renovated, etc. So it's really important to know your market. Now moving into the property market, all the stats that you need, and the property market, the sales. This is for June. So the sales, the new listings, median price, average price, days on market, and what's happening there. So for June, days on market is always telling. It's 29, 33 was last year. So as a result, that's improving. That means inventory is moving. But we're seeing that the sales are month over month down, but year over year up. New listings up. Median price 4.5% year over year, and average price 2.2% up year over year. And we'll watch that monthly stats as we come into it. Now, this is what we were talking about earlier, is affordability. Vincent, you were mentioning you're seeing that huge, that people are moving into Edmonton because of it. This is one of like a fantastic report. I love it. It's the RBC Housing Affordability Index, basically, and it's showing at 25.8. Now, take note, if this is something that's new to you, your investor target benchmark. Like this is your business, you're an investor. I like benchmarks. I always have them for my property analysis, et cetera, et cetera. And when it comes to investor targets, you want to be targeting ideally at 25 to 39% range. That's where you can have the best yield. And so 25.8 is perfect. That's an ideal situation for yield. That's return on investment. Now, that said, that you can still get return on investment in other locations. Like you can still get properties that cash flow in Vancouver, which is 73.9, in Toronto at 68.6. It's not easy. It's also a different market insofar as you're going to have different kinds of cap rates. You're going to have different kinds of risk. And I think I've mentioned this many times, but just to reiterate, Like those markets can be really good as part of a well-balanced portfolio. And I like having properties in different markets because they do different things at different times. And when Toronto and Ontario and things like that were way up, guess what? Extract it and put it somewhere else. This is the business. So unless you're, buy and hold for forever, but you still have diversification. I love this chart. It shows just a ton of stuff in terms of housing starts, but also comparing them. I love it when you compare. So Edmonton, it's not like super high, but and you can see that it's less than Calgary, but the population sizes and things like this. All right. And then the downtown office vacancy, et cetera, et cetera. So you just, I love these ones where you can compare. Edmonton shifts to a more balanced real estate market. Condo sales are up from April. So residential units are down. Macro, this is where I'm kind of going here. So this is what you need to know for the conclusions for Edmonton. Like I said, there's lots of data in there. Pull it out. You've got all the sources. If you need to go back and find it and repurpose it for whatever reason. The macro indicators. So this is where we need some attention is required here. There's a lot of changes. There's a lot of variables. There's a lot of politics and policies. There's a lot of, like I was talking about the parrot effect of what's actually happening in terms of inflation and what responses to it, and what we want to pay attention to that, and this softening now through 23, 24. And yet we still expect that growth for the long term. With the city indicators, we've got a really solid, stable, leading indicators in terms of the GDP, in terms of the job growth. I mean, that was insane. Population is above the national average. This is all good, and we're expecting it to continue to be really, really good. One thing I love about Edmonton, and Raveen, kind of going back to your question without saying it, because in terms of that ranking, but one thing I love about Edmonton is that it is the seat of government. And there's a certain element where in capital cities, so like Ottawa, like Victoria, British Columbia, like Edmonton, Alberta, they have a level of government employees, stability, that really, really helps soften any ups or downs. And so they can be a really good long-term play. And I'm particularly fond of de-risking, and I find that government towns like that can be very helpful for that. So we do want to watch if and how that population growth accelerates, especially with this better affordability and lower inflation. I think that could accelerate quite significantly. And again, those Gen Zs are the ones who are primarily coming in from an immigration perspective. And economic activity is up. Q1 is down slightly, but again, it's still growth. So that's where these recession comments, it's 5.3% growth. Okay, so it's down from 5.7. That's okay, because we want to actually see quote unquote recession. This is weird. So we actually want to see the word recession in a little bit, because we can't have growth that's 5.7, 5.8, 5.7. That's completely unsustainable. So at some point you need it. It's okay, so we've got some good growth, and then it gets down. You want some growth, and a benchmark for GDP growth is somewhere in I think it's a 3 or 4%. 2 is pretty good, 3 is okay, 4, but you start getting higher than that, and it's completely unsustainable, or it's fake. So we don't want fake GDP. So there's a real opportunity here for real estate investing for the long term. And remember, anything can change at any time, so please stay tuned. So when we put all of this into our fancy, behind the scenes fancy real estate cycle formula, we see that we've got a long trajectory ahead of us, notwithstanding what we're seeing in this softening that's coming up. So when we actually place it and score it and rank it, we're actually in what's called this sort of middle of stabilization period. Now, what we might see is that this is what could happen, because remember, we can't predict the duration too much, although we're getting closer, is that it could go into really quickly into a small contraction for a short amount of time, but it's that long decade is where we're targeting, that long decade ahead. So what you want to do now is, again, similarly to Canada, fix and flips could be a little bit more challenging right now. Rent to owns could be a little bit more challenging, but if it's a long rent to own, then it's totally doable. But long-term buy and hold. But again, now because of where we're seeing this potential play of inflation and rising interest rates, meet affordability, meet return on investment, meet all of these things, and having that bathtub effect in terms of reverberation, it is a time that you'll be wanting to be cautious for sure about purchasing right this moment. But certainly there's great deals and great, it's not about the deal. It's a great market for the long term. And for those of you who are in the market already, this is a major hold signal. Like this, like now is not the time to be selling. This is a great time to be holding it, maybe improving on your properties a little bit, like Naran was saying he's doing in Ontario, just like a little lipstick rouge, get it tenanted and hang on for the long term. And there you are. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was your market analysis for Edmonton. And I think I'll just leave it at that. You've heard me rant plenty of times today, so I'm going to stop sharing. And then actually, I'd love, Vincent, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about I'm putting you completely on the spot, but your experiences in the Edmonton market, because we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, for sure. Right now, there's a lot of great.
First of all, for those of you who don't know, in case you're watching this elsewhere, Vincent is our Chief Technology Officer. He's an active investor in Edmonton and is acquiring right now.
Absolutely. So definitely a great market in Edmonton right now. There's a lot of off-market deals and great deals to be had. We looked at a 20-suiter today. There's great potential, especially with the MLI Select product that CMHC came out with 5% down. We're going moving forward with that. We're looking at 3 different multifamilies right now, and that's going to add about 75 doors, all affordable. And it's with the product CMHC just gave out, you can't beat it. And all the indicators right now in Edmonton definitely showing a buy signal for us. Now it's on off market. We're not looking at stuff being listed on MLS and stuff like that. So you do need to do your research. But like Naran said earlier, if you don't know the fundamentals or you're struggling with it, a bit of that, attend his classes because he definitely teach that stuff. But right now, for us, definitely a buy. It's one of the most affordable cities in Canada, and it's just trending upward, especially with our diversification on the different job markets we have here. Besides, tech is huge in Alberta and Calgary and Edmonton. Tech, innovation, oil and gas is booming. We have a balanced budget here coming within the province, and we continue to give back. So definitely, it's a hot market.
Awesome. Well, thank you. It's always great to get on the boots, on the ground, in the boots, whatever, at the location. So thanks so much, Vincent, for sharing yours. And what I'd like to do, everyone, we're bringing this into a close. And thank you so much for joining us. I know that's a lot of information for you, and I really hope that you find it of value, especially that macro stuff of what's going on. So stay tuned, stay with us, and it's great to see some of your smiling faces. And by the way, Doug, I think you should get an award because I think you're the first on every time. So thank you for being here and asking great questions. And I'd like to remind you, please consider having your friends or you, or if you're watching this out there, come and join us at our free trial for the Real Estate Wealth Lab. And if you're brand new and just starting out, you'll definitely want to get in touch with us as well, because we've got a brand new 10-week course. It literally just started, so you can stay right on track with Naran and Wendy. So get in touch with us. And Paige, if you want to pop that in the chat, share with your friends about the Real Estate Wealth Lab. And if you want more research and you want all of that analysis, definitely invite your friends and we will be able to get that for you. We're just growing our research team now for you. So that would be awesome. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to see you not next week, the week after. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.